It's no more news that China and the United States have been in a sour relationship for the last 6 years, which also evolved into an unhealthy rivalry between Washington and Beijing. China, for example, is advancing toward a more radical approach against the US by trying almost everything within its power to de-dollarize the world and, in turn, dethrone the world's de facto leader, the United States. Several analysts believe that this was the subtext of Xi Jinping's visit to Saudi Arabia last December. Of course, the United States knew about the visit, but decided to say little on the subject. However, anyone paying attention will notice the tensions behind closed doors. Unlike last year's infamous fist bump between US President Joe Biden and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping received a rather majestic reception from the Saudis when he visited the emirate last year. President Xi's visit was said to be the culmination of a budding 6-year relationship. Apart from all necessary discussions at the China-GCC Summit, China-Arab Summit, Saudi-Chinese Summit, and signing China's 34 investment agreements worth $29.9 billion, President Xi wasted no time in putting forward China's main interest: OPEC's exchange of oil in favor of the Chinese yuan instead of the United States dollars. In other words, China was asking the UAE to abandon its 8-decade-long partnership with the United States and consider selling oil in Chinese yuan. Inevitably, this move will increase China's international leverage, and the increase in demand for the Chinese yuan will skyrocket her economy more than ever. However, China didn't get so bold in one day. While Beijing's relationship with Saudi Arabia progressed, the United States' relationship with the Arabs was nearing rock bottom for several reasons. First was Biden's resolve to punish the Crown Prince for allegedly ordering the killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. According to a U.S. intelligence report, men from Mohammed bin Salman's Rapid Intervention Front, as well as his special aide, were linked to Khashoggi's murder. And since the Crown Prince was in charge of Saudi Arabia's intelligence, the killing needed his approval. Secondly, the Saudis report that the U.S. military presence in the UAE was waning. In retrospect, the petrodollar deal was signed on the basis of the United States' undisputed military presence in Saudi Arabia in exchange for pegging the US dollar on Saudi's oil exports in 1944. According to US history, the arrangement was called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Post-World War II saw a lot of nations struggle economically, including England, but not the US. Washington had amassed a massive gold reserve that made America the envy of the world. Also, the US was smart enough to peg the dollars to gold at $35 per ounce. And so the demand for gold also meant a demand for US dollars. Some sources say that the US government's commitment to keep the exchange rate at that price brought even more interest for the dollars and made it more flexible than gold. Eventually, the United States had a hard time keeping this commitment and had to put a pause on the whole arrangement under President Nixon's government. Here goes the reason. The United States printed a staggering lot of dollars, which increased dollar circulation around the world and, in turn, led to the overvaluation of the US dollar. The United States battled with severe inflation as gold couldn't compare with dollars. Nothing could. The pause was never lifted, and folks decided to call it the Nixon Shock. However, the United States had one last alternative up their sleeves. Since the dollar's redemption for gold hit rock bottom, the U.S. sent its Secretary of State all the way to the Middle East to broker a deal with Saudi Arabia. In exchange for the U.S. military protection in a war-torn Middle East, Saudi Arabia's large oil reserve would be exchanged or sold in U.S. dollars. The arrangement seemed good to both parties, and they shook hands, made the necessary arrangements, and voila, Uncle Sam was back on his feet. It isn't clear if the United States had calculated the outcome beforehand, but other oil-producing nations followed Saudi Arabia's footsteps and brokered oil deals in U.S. dollars. Moreover, Saudi Arabia saved its surpluses in U.S. reserves, alongside the other nations who brokered in dollars. Now you know where the United States debt security means. The U.S.-Saudi partnership was a really viable one. China wouldn't stand a chance against that kind of long-term relationship, except for the recent fallouts which, if I remember, we are still talking about. So yeah, the U.S. accused Prince Mohammed bin Salman of ordering Khashoggi's murder, and the Saudi government of human rights violations. By the way, the U.S. military presence wasn't so present, pun intended. Another case for concern was Saudi Arabia's refusal to join the League of Nations, which sanctioned Russia for attacking Ukraine. The Saudis insist that Moscow remains a vital energy-producing partner and must be included in important OPEC decisions. Saudi Arabia removed itself from the populist movement against Russia, and Washington wasn't too happy about it. Now, fast forward to the infamous fist bump. President Biden's government was suffering from a huge cut of 2 million barrels cut from OPEC's daily output. The American majority was experiencing a hard time at the gas pumps, which forced President Biden to the Middle East, despite the mid-tensions between both countries. President Biden met a frigid welcome, and at the end of the day, OPEC only added 100,000 barrels back into production, even after Biden's plea to stabilize the prices. And the Americans weren't happy about that. We can infer that China capitalized on the strenuous relationship between these guys when President Xi Jinping flew to the Middle East. Moreover, China and the United States had issues of their own, while the Chinese government and Saudi Arabia agreed on several policies. Both governments refused to sanction Russia for starting the Russia-Ukraine war. They agreed to cooperate on peaceful usage of nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, and innovate the energy sector. Also, China prides itself as the world's biggest oil buyer, and Saudi Arabia, being the world's top supplier, meant they connected on profitable terms. But is it enough to end an 80-year alliance? There are currently no media publications that discuss President Xi's success at de-dollarizing the world. But we know that after he talked about it at the Gulf Summit, it was never discussed for a second time. Neither were promises made to consider it in the future. The words on everyone's lips is that President Xi was rejected by the Saudi-led oil cartel OPEC. However, some analysts believe that President Xi will eventually get what he wants in the coming years. Now, although the UAE didn't say, there are several reasons why political analysts believe that the Chinese yuan isn't ready to replace the US dollar. For one, most people are aware of China's frequent currency manipulation in order to make her exports more viable in the international market, which makes them less trustworthy, and frankly, OPEC wouldn't want to take that kind of risk. Another question on people's minds concerns the development of the Chinese economy. Lately, China is still plagued by the epidemic, graduate unemployment, which has recently risen to 20%, and rumors of an economic crisis. Even Saudi Arabia's got reservations of their own. In 2021, the Saudis had a trade surplus of a little over $26 billion with China. If that amount of cash had been in Chinese yuan, the Saudis would have hit a hard spell trying to spend it and would be forced to buy more goods from China than they intended. Also, despite that the US and Saudi Arabia weren't on the best of terms, the US military is more capable of protecting Saudi Arabia than the Chinese. So the Saudis couldn't just end their partnership with the United States. As long as the US dollar is still the only currency traded for oil, the US remains a dominant force in the world's economy and, as such, the de facto leader of the modern world. Moreover, China has failed several trade agreements with other countries. In Russia, China signed a no-limit deal, maintaining that there are no limits to their relationship. However, China hasn't been fully committed to this deal. As a matter of fact, Beijing has totally ignored Russia's frequent call for aid because it doesn't want to break the US-led curbs on Russia's economy. But at the same time, Beijing shared a joint military drill with Moscow. It seems President Xi wants to protect his close relationship with Moscow while signaling neutrality concerning the Russia-Ukraine war. In that way, China doesn't seem to be against the Russians or championing their cause. Honestly, maintaining this kind of relationship can be pretty difficult. Another problem China might have to deal with is Iran. After President Xi's joint statement at the GCC meeting regarding disputed islands between the UAE and Iran, the Iranian government summoned the Chinese ambassador to Tehran and expressed their dissatisfaction. But that wasn't the end of the matter, as Iranian print media Arman Daily published an article with the headline, "Taiwan Independence, a Legal Right, to Spite China's Violent Territorial Claim over Taiwan." In recent troubles, Joe Biden's government has banned all products manufactured in China's northwestern Xinjiang province. According to the U.S. State Department, about 2 million Uyghurs, the largest minority group in the province, have been imprisoned, inhumanely tortured, and gruesomely killed since 2017. China has denied these allegations. Also, China has tried to assure the Iranians that their relationship with the UAE won't affect their diplomacy with Iran. China isn't the worst country in the world, but putting in consideration its recent internal and external troubles, we don't see the Chinese yuan competing with the United States dollars as the oil cartel's primary exchange currency. Moreover, the yuan is practically useless outside of China. But if there's any bit of consolation for China, then it'll be Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud's press statement that the Saudi government is focused on cooperation with all parties. Well, thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to get more great content like this. Until next time.